Most Old Norse Icelandic works of literature are anonymous. That is, they cannot be ascribed to named authors or attributed to named authors. What about the scribes of the manuscripts? Is the dividing line between an author and a scribe always clear?
Well, the scribes are mostly anonymous also. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the Middle Ages, later on, scribes in the post-medieval period, scribes start writing their names in their manuscripts, but it's very, very unusual, rare in the medieval period for us to know who wrote a particular manuscript. When a scribe becomes an author, this is also a very tricky question. I think almost without exception, we could say that no scribe ever copied exactly what was in front of him. They always changed something. And some of the changes were accidental. You leave out a word or you leave out a sentence or whatever. But some of the changes were definitely deliberate. And scribes definitely modernized the language. So they would write the word as they themselves would write it, as it were, so not necessarily the way that it was in the exemplar, the manuscript that they were copying from. But also sometimes they would change things or add things or leave things out. And they would do this for various reasons. One might be just because they thought it sounded better to put it one way rather than another way. Or perhaps you can see evidence for scribes running out of room, basically, so they only have 2 leaves left and they have 3 leaves worth of material, so they have to try and shorten it so that it will fit, or the opposite, where you can see that a scribe has a little bit of extra room, so why not add a few more sentences describing something, or you know. So there were all kinds of reasons for things being changed. And this is where you get into the, you know, what's a copy, what's a version? When does a text that's been copied represent a new version of a saga rather than just being a text of that saga? And this is with all the Icelandic sagas we have. In most cases, we have more than one version. With the Fornaldasögur, for example, which I've been looking at, the mythical heroic sagas, as they're called in English, they exist. There's about 35 of them, and they invariably exist in at least 2 versions. And normally we think there's a shorter and older one, and then there's a longer, younger one. So the tendency seems to be for sagas to acquire more episodes. And become longer. And this makes them, depending on how you look at it, this makes them less authentic, as it were, if you think that a story as it was originally written down or told is better than one that's been changed. But in terms of aesthetics, this isn't always true. There are 2 versions of Örvarod's saga, for example, where the second and what we believe to be the younger and longer is much better artistically than the shorter version. So there are different ways of looking at it. And so when did the scribe who made the longer version of Örvarod's saga, for example, is he the author of it then? I think definitely you could make a case for that, but it's very difficult to say, you know, scribe, redactor, or editor, author, you know, because it's all, you know, it's a continuum. All scribes change things. Some scribes change them more than others, and then so you could say that they were the authors. They probably didn't think of themselves as being authors, though. This is another question. What did authorship mean in the Middle Ages?